Roger and Mrs. Mueller go in a horse-drawn carriage to his family's house in the French countryside in 1914. He makes every effort to keep his eyes from drifting to the older woman's massive chest as they travel. His mother and Aunt Marguerite welcome him home from the grand house. After asking the youngster whether he still remembers her after being gone for 3 years, one of the maids, Ursula, helps with his things. From the attic window, Mr. Frank, his father's friend, waves. Berthe, Roger's sister, welcomes him into the home with a loving hug. The siblings later run upon Mrs. Mueller as they go about the farm. She has just finished harvesting fruit. Berthe waves to her husband as he strolls by. The teen is shocked when Mrs. Mueller abruptly removes her clothing and goes to the bathroom. Roger is alone until he comes upon Mr. Mueller in the middle of the forest, praying and cramming flowers down his trousers as he stands in front of a photo of his wife. The elder guy is alerted when the teenager walks on a twig. Roger flees as a result, but in his haste he trips and collapses on the ground. A few seconds later, he hears laughing nearby and goes in that direction. He is shocked to see Ursula having a sexual encounter with Adolphe, a male employee of the villa. When the woman notices the teenager peering, she just laughs and wishes him a good morning, which makes Roger run away in shame. The teen notices the lovely maid Helene at dinner and gives her a questioning look. When Mr. Frank inquires about her daughter Elisa's lover, the mother replies that he is an army lieutenant. When showing the guy a picture of the pair, she asks Kate, the governess, to put her daughter to bed when Berthe makes crude comments about the image. Soon after, Roger excuses himself, and when he gives his aunt a goodnight kiss on the cheek, she declines to accept another one. The teenager hears a sound coming from the hallway as he gets ready for bed that night. When he goes to look, he discovers Helene making out with an unknown man through an open door. He goes back to his room and discovers Berthe lying on his bed as he pulls back the sheets. The child claims she isn't sleepy and wants to keep talking to her brother, who she has missed greatly. She claims that their mother stated Marguerite's fear of men is why she chooses to stay virginal. The child responds that she believes the reason Mr. Frank and his aunt aren't together is that the man is ugly and a little strange when Roger inquires as to why. Suddenly, Kate walks in to chastise Berthe for getting out of bed. The girl rushes back to her room as a result. When the governess notices the teenager's rising sheets, she tries to remove the covers, and Roger hides himself out of embarrassment. The next day, the siblings watch the maids from the other side of the river as they submerge their feet. When Ursula and Helene inquire about Mrs. Mueller's husband, the elderly woman reveals that he still struggles in the bedroom. Later, Ursula amuses the guys by flashing her naked behind while Adolphe and Valentine playfully taunt the women from the other side of the lake. When Roger sees this, he is horrified by what he sees. The rest of the family welcomes their father and sister Elisa when they arrive later that day. Roger and Berthe examine their father's metal examples inside. The older guy bemoans how business has slowed down since there is less demand for military awards now that there is no conflict. The guy sees Roger peering up Ursula's skirt that day when the maids and Adolphe are working together to haul supplies up into the barn. He then playfully throws hay on Roger. Berthe later brings her brother to church, where they skulk to a crawl area above the confessional. She claims she stumbled into it, and has spent a lot of time listening in. Roger remains behind after his sister departs to hear his Aunt Marguerite's confession to Father Gabriel. He is shocked to learn from his aunt that she had indecent ideas regarding Roger. The ceiling collapses as the kid moves closer, stunning his aunt as he falls into the priest's confessional. Roland, Elisa's boyfriend, arrives later and sees Roger being punished. Berthe hugs and kisses her grieving brother goodnight that night. He hears Helene and the mysterious man making out in the corridor once more moments later. He notices Mr. Frank also keeping an eye on the maid beside a cupboard. Then he runs across Ursula, who claims that neither she nor Helene knows who her mysterious boyfriend is. Mr. Frank is using his telescope when Roger enters the attic and notices him. The man leaves, and the teenager looks through the telescope to see a couple making out on the lawn. Then, just as Mr. Frank came back, he picked up a book from the table and put it in his pocket. When Roger asks the man if he experienced frustration as a teenager, the man replies that he still does on occasion. The teenager peers into his parents' bedroom on the way home. Roger promises to do anything Roland demands, but Roland finds him and threatens to tell his parents what he did. Roland tells the teenager to wash his car the next day. Elisa soon joins them, and as the cop climbs aboard the car to kiss the woman, Roger accidentally slides the water bucket beneath him, causing the officer to collapse. Later on in the day, the teenager hides in the chicken coop and reads Mr. Frank's collection of writings and images for adults. Adolphe arrives abruptly and spreads hay on the ground. Helene then shows up through the glass to start feeding the hens. When she least expects it, the man approaches her and suddenly shuts the window, trapping her inside the narrow space. When Adolphe starts making love to her outside, Helene begs Roger for assistance, but quickly retracts her request. When the adolescent comes out of the coop, she sees the maids naked behind. When he gets back home, he changes Elisa's book with Mr. Frank's adult novel while she is preoccupied. He then makes fun of Roland's shoes, which causes the latter to accuse him of peeking into their bedroom the night before and telling his mother. Roger is told to leave the room by his mother, but he pauses in the corner to make sure his sister picks up the book. He later observes Elisa reading the same book behind a tree. The youngster surprises Ursula in the kitchen as she is removing the meal from the oven. In response, the startled woman smashes a dish over his head. When she sees it's Roger, she attends to his wound while putting her body in a seductive position next to his face. The two are abruptly interrupted by the entrance of another maid. Roger accompanies Mrs. Mueller to the chapel's upper level, where he makes the decision to eventually mature into a man. In order to get her husband to stop praying at the altar, she peers out the little window. The teen enters the space abruptly and starts groping the elder woman in an unpleasant manner. She urges him to stop at first, but soon cheers him on by lowering her skirt. They are interrupted by an outside messenger, and the woman bolts from the room. The messenger outside notifies the employees that France and Germany are at war. The wealthy family in the house, meantime, rejoices at the news of the war since it signals that military honors will soon be in great demand. The male employees of the villa take advantage of their final night by setting up meetings with the female employees that evening. To Roger's dismay, he tries to join in the fun but discovers that everyone else has coupled up already. The following day, Elisa bids Roland farewell while Berthe and her mother watch. At the same time, the female staff workers ride in the horse-drawn carriage with the males as they leave the villa. The women give the adolescent knowing looks as they return. Later on in the day, Ursula requests Roger's assistance in carrying a mattress upstairs. He approaches the woman in the bedroom, and she finds the novice teen's advances amusing. The woman eventually shuts the door, takes her clothes off in front of Roger, and they start making out. Following the act, the happy teenager declares his love for Ursula and proposes to her. He merely said it since it was his first time having a sexual encounter with a woman, the lady realizes as she chuckles lightheartedly. After some time has passed, Berthe notices her brother's ripped shirt and assumes he has just accomplished the deed. She then tells her brother that their mother is chatting to Father Gabriel at the moment. They move to the living room in order to listen in on the talk. The mother discusses her issues with her husband in the bedroom, and the priest counsels her to just be present and open to satisfying him, particularly at this time, during a time of war. The mother scolds her kids for listening in after hearing them laughing out of the blue. Later, when Kate combs her hair beside the river, Roger shocks her by jumping out of the water. She responds that she no longer feels in danger now that the men have gone off to war when he inquires as to why she never used to sit by the river. The adolescent says he's always thought she was pretty. Then, after rising from the water, he shows off his nakedness. After splashing the governess with water in a pleasant manner, the two start having fun together. Days later, after Roland shot down a third jet, Elisa hurries to tell her family that Roland made the paper. Elisa notes that her boyfriend is wearing one of her father's medals in the photo as the grown-ups laud over the war hero's valor. Marguerite and Kate sneaked into the parents' bedroom that night. Roger arrives a little while later, but the cocky teenager opens the door and sits on the chair to observe his parents. His father is playing the part of the man prepared to perform the woman's execution, while the pair is having fun. When the father finally recognizes his kid, the teenager exits the room, leaving his parents dumbfounded and mortified. Marguerite surprises herself when she goes back to her bedroom and discovers her nephew sitting on her bed. She offers him a kiss on the cheek after he begs for a goodnight kiss. The surprised woman orders the adolescent to go, or she'll contact his mother after he makes it clear that he wants a kiss similar to the ones she gave him as a child. He claims to sense approaching footsteps as he prepares to depart. The aunt inquires as to who the guest is and discovers that Mr. Frank has come to recite her a poem he had written specifically for her. Roger grabs the woman's hand and guides her back to the bed while the unconcerned guy delivers the poetry declaring his love for Marguerite. Just as the lady engages in a delightful deed, he rotates the Mother Mary statue so that it faces the wall. Mr. Frank hears sounds coming from the room via the door. Roger notices the next day that Mr. Frank recently got a package. He then follows the man to the attic where he discovers that he is peering into a wooden box that has a window through which one may watch adult images. When the youngster wonders why he doesn't just sleep with actual ladies, Mr. Frank responds that it's only simple for someone like Roger to do so. The kid beckons Helene into his room that night as she is walking down the corridor. Since he is aware that neither his father nor Mr. Frank are making out with her in the hallway, he asks the maid who she believes the mystery guy to be. Helene claims she believes Mr. Mueller was responsible, but the teen points out that Mrs. Mueller claims her husband is no longer able to perform in the bedroom. According to the maid, he can only do this with his sweetheart. In the same way that her former mysterious lover used to make love to her, Roger stops the maid as she is about to leave the room and makes out with her. The following day, Bear questions her brother, and he confirms that he completed the crime with the governess. She acknowledges that Kate and the maids informed her that Roger had done it with everyone. He denies fully performing the act when the girl asks if he made love to Marguerite. The teenager then follows Elisa into the stables as she rides by on her horse. Roger offers to take the woman's shoes off her sore feet as she grooms her horse. But the teenager starts caressing the woman in an improper way. They hear Mrs. Mueller enter the stables as Elisa attempts to stop her brother. Elisa ultimately gives in and makes love to Roger, as the older woman is busy tending to the horse in the barn next to them. Bert notices her brother leaving the stables from outside and assumes that he has just finished performing the act with a new partner. She then recognizes Elisa and knows what had transpired. That evening, Ursula and Helene simultaneously enter Roger's chamber to make love to him. The women leave the room after finishing the act. When Ursula notices Kate approaching Marguerite as she enters the teen's room, she tells the governess that Marguerite is required in Roger's room. The maid chooses to participate in the activities since she is going to depart after having a change of heart. The following morning, Ursula wakes up and abandons Roger, Kate, and Marguerite still dozing on the bed. Days later, after having sex, the teen and Elisa confess that the lady could be pregnant, and that they are unsure of what to do. She yanks Roger behind a tree so Roland won't see them as a jet suddenly flies overhead. The family welcomes the combat hero once he lands the aircraft, and he joyfully announces to them that he has been promoted to captain. A carriage carrying the male employees who have returned from the battle passes by as they make their way back to the residence. Later, the staff members and maids hang Adolphe by his broken leg to extend it. The other maids rush to comfort Mrs. Mueller as she goes by and tells them that her husband was killed in battle. Ursula comes into Roger's room that evening to inform him that she is expecting. Adolphe's current state as a cripple prevents her from accepting his proposal to marry him. So, even though Valentine only has one eye left, she thinks about getting married to him. The teen begs her to bring him a bottle of red nail paint before she departs. Marguerite shows up after the maid departs to inform him that she is also expecting. Roger thus recommends that she wed Mr. Frank, whom he regards as a decent man who is obviously in love with her. The teen takes Ursula with him to Elisa's room when she arrives shortly with the red nail paint. He gives the maid instructions to apply nail paint to his sister's bed linens there. Ursula is told to stop by an enraged Elisa, who also seizes the nail paint bottle from her. Roger instructs the maid to wait for him in his room while he speaks to his sister in order to calm the women. Elisa is instructed to find Roland and inform him that they need to make out right away. Elisa then goes downstairs to look for the stupid boyfriend. Marguerite is brought to Mr. Frank in the attic by Roger, who goes back to his room to get her. The kid overhears Elisa persuading Roland that they can have sexual relations before getting married since Father Gabriel indicated it is acceptable to do so during wartime. Roger then goes to Kate's room to inquire about her pregnancy. She responds negatively, which gives him relief that he has taken care of all his unfinished business.